Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a deeply moving story about a young girl named Emma, who endured cruelty at the hands of her stepmother. Trapped in a life of endless chores and neglect, she longed for love and freedom. But when hope seemed lost, a single act of courage changed everything. Join us as we follow Emma's journey from despair to a new beginning, proving that even in the darkest moments, light can be found. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. The rain tapped gently against the window pane, its soft rhythm the only sound in the dimly lit room. Emma, a small 5-year-old girl with golden curls and eyes too deep for someone so young, stood by the tiny window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass. Outside, Cedar Falls stretched into the mist, the small town seemingly too vast and indifferent for a child who had no one to rely on. She should have been outside, running through puddles, laughing as the water splashed around her feet. But Emma had long stopped believing in such joys. "Emma, come down here this instant." The sharp voice of Victoria, her stepmother, cut through the air, sending a shiver down Emma's spine. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek and turned away from the window. "Yes, I'm coming," she answered softly, barely above a whisper, fearing her voice might tremble too much. She hurried down the wooden staircase, her small bare feet making no sound against the cold floor. Victoria was waiting for her in the kitchen, one hand holding a dish towel, the other perched on her hip. Her dark brown hair was curled into perfect waves, her expensive silk dress making her look out of place in their modest home. She looked like a woman who belonged to grand dinner parties, not a household filled with the scent of worn-out furniture and unspoken sorrow. "What were you doing up there? Daydreaming again?" Victoria sneered, tapping her foot impatiently. "Go wash the dishes, and be quick about it." Emma lowered her head and obediently walked toward the sink, where a mountain of dirty plates awaited her. Her tiny hands trembled as she dipped them into the cold, soapy water. The chill seeped into her bones. But she dared not complain. Complaining only made things worse. When her father, Daniel, had remarried after her mother's passing, Emma had thought she was getting a new mother, someone who would tuck her in at night, stroke her hair, and sing lullabies when bad dreams came. At first, Victoria had seemed kind. She smiled warmly, spoke gently, and even held Emma's hand when they walked through the town. But that illusion shattered the moment Daniel left for his long business trip. Victoria had transformed overnight. Her voice lost its warmth, her eyes turned cold, and suddenly, Emma was no longer a child to be cared for but a burden to be tolerated. A servant to be used. "Be careful with that plate." Victoria's sharp voice made Emma flinch. "If you break it, you'll regret it." Emma swallowed hard and nodded. She bit the inside of her cheek to stop her tears from falling. Tears only irritated Victoria more. After dinner, Victoria lounged in the living room, watching television, while Emma scrubbed every surface of the kitchen until it gleamed. When she was done, she timidly approached Victoria, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Stepmother, I finished cleaning. May I go to my room now?" Victoria barely looked at her. She waved a dismissive hand. "Go, but wake up early tomorrow. The floors need mopping. I don't want to see a speck of dust. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand," Emma whispered, as she climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her room was small, just big enough for a hard bed and a thin blanket. The nights in Cedar Falls were often cold, but Emma never dared ask for another blanket. She had tried once, only for Victoria to laugh cruelly. "If you're cold, work harder. That'll warm you up." Emma slipped under the thin covers and reached beneath her pillow, pulling out the only thing that brought her comfort, a photograph of her mother. In the picture, her mother's eyes were warm, filled with love, the kind of love Emma no longer remembered feeling. "Mom, I miss you so much," she whispered, her fingers tracing the outline of her mother's face. The wind howled outside, rattling the window slightly. Emma curled up tighter, hugging the photograph to her chest. She closed her eyes, trying to remember what it felt like to be held, to be loved, to belong. Morning came too soon. Before the sun had even risen, Victoria's loud knocking jolted Emma awake. "Emma, get up now. You need to clean the entire kitchen today." Don't make me repeat myself. Emma jumped out of bed, quickly pulling on her worn-out clothes. Her stomach ached with hunger. But she didn't mention it. Breakfast, if Victoria allowed it, would be nothing more than a hard slice of bread and a glass of water. As she swept the floor, she overheard Victoria speaking to Mrs. Patterson. Their neighbor. That girl is such a nuisance, Victoria said with disdain. But what can I do? Daniel insisted I take care of her. At least she's useful for housework. Mrs. Patterson sighed, her gaze briefly resting on Emma as she scrubbed the floor. You should be gentler with her. She's just a child. Victoria laughed loudly. Gentle? Everyone has to work. If you don't work, you don't eat. It's as simple as that. Emma lowered her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. She continued cleaning in silence, feeling more like a shadow than a little girl. That afternoon, Victoria left the house to meet her friends. Emma remained behind, but the quiet brought no peace. Instead, it meant she had to rush to finish the long list of chores Victoria had left before she returned. She moved from one task to the next, hands aching from scrubbing, knees sore from kneeling on the cold floor. She had learned to move quickly, efficiently, making no mistakes, because mistakes meant punishment. While she was washing clothes in the backyard, the unexpected sound of the doorbell made her freeze. Who could it be? Victoria wasn't home, and nobody ever visited for Emma. Drying her hands on the hem of her dress, she hesitantly made her way to the door and opened it. Standing on the porch was a boy, about her age, with messy black hair, dirt smudged on his cheeks, and bright, mischievous eyes. Hi, I'm Noah. I live next door. He grinned. I see you around all the time. But you never come outside. Do you want to play? Emma blinked at him, unsure of what to say. No one had ever invited her to play before. I can't, she murmured, glancing behind her as if Victoria might suddenly appear. My stepmother doesn't let me go outside. Noah frowned. She doesn't let you play? But you're a kid. Kids are supposed to play. Emma swallowed, not knowing how to explain the life she lived. She'll get mad if she finds out I talked to you. Noah crossed his arms. That's not fair. He hesitated for a moment before his face lit up with an idea. How about I come inside and play with you instead? Emma's eyes widened in fear. No. If she finds out, she broke off, her hands clenching into fists. You should go, please. Noah sighed but gave her a small, encouraging smile. Okay, but if you ever get to come outside, let me know. I live just over there. He pointed to the house beside hers. Emma nodded, watching him run off. For the first time in a long while, a tiny spark of warmth flickered in her heart. Someone had noticed her. Someone had cared. But the warmth faded the moment she heard the sound of Victoria's car pulling up in front of the house. Panic shot through her veins. She quickly picked up the laundry basket and ran inside, pretending she had been working the entire time. Victoria entered the house, carrying several shopping bags, her face impassive as she set them down on the counter. Emma, come here. Emma hurried to her side, hands folded neatly in front of her. Take these bags to the kitchen. Be careful. If you drop anything, you'll regret it, Victoria said coldly. Emma nodded and carefully lifted each bag, carrying them to the kitchen. Her arms ached, but she said nothing. As she put the groceries away, she heard Victoria laughing on the phone. I honestly don't know why Daniel thought I should be responsible for raising that girl, she said, her voice laced with disdain. She's just a burden to me. But at least she's useful for cleaning. Emma's hands stilled. She had always known Victoria didn't love her, but hearing it said so plainly made her chest tighten painfully. Am I just a burden? She wondered. That night, Emma lay awake in bed, her stomach growling with hunger. Dinner had been nothing more than a small, stale piece of bread and a glass of water. She stared at the ceiling, her mind drifting back to Noah's words. Kids are supposed to play. Maybe she wasn't supposed to live like this. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out. The next morning, Emma woke up to the harsh sound of Victoria pounding on her door. Emma, get up this instant. I don't want to have to call you twice. Emma sat up quickly, rubbing her tired eyes. The cold air made her shiver. But she dared not hesitate. She hurriedly dressed and rushed downstairs. where Victoria stood waiting with a long list of chores in her manicured hands. "I'll be out all day today," Victoria said coolly, handing her the list. "I expect everything to be spotless when I return. If I come back and anything is undone, don't expect dinner tonight." Emma took the list silently, her heart sinking as she read through it. Clean the glass cabinets, scrub the floors, wash the laundry, reorganize the storage room. The list went on. Victoria turned, grabbing her purse from the table. "And don't even think about leaving this house," she added over her shoulder before slamming the door behind her. Emma stood frozen for a moment, gripping the paper tightly in her hands. The walls around her felt taller than ever, suffocating her. She worked tirelessly throughout the morning, her small hands red and raw from scrubbing. By the afternoon, her body ached, her stomach growled, and she felt dizzy from exhaustion. As she was kneeling in the hallway, wiping the floor, the doorbell rang. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Was Victoria back already? She wiped her hands on her dress and cautiously opened the door. To her surprise, Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor, stood there, her kind eyes scanning Emma's tired face. "Hello, sweetheart," she said gently. "Is your stepmother home?" Emma swallowed hard and shook her head. Mrs. Patterson hesitated, her gaze filled with concern. "Are you all right? You look so pale." Emma opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She wanted to tell her, to let the truth spill out, but fear clutched at her throat. Mrs. Patterson sighed. "All right, dear. When Victoria comes back, tell her I stopped by." Emma nodded and quickly shut the door. She leaned against the wood, her fingers trembling. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen how tired she was. But would anyone truly help? That night, when Victoria returned, she inspected every corner of the house. "This cabinet isn't clean enough," she snapped. "What have you been doing all day?" I cleaned it. But maybe I missed a spot." Emma stammered. "Missed a spot? Then do it again." Victoria slammed a hand on the counter, making Emma flinch. She quickly picked up the cloth and began wiping the glass, even though her arms felt like they could barely move. As she worked, she knew something had to change. She couldn't live like this forever. For the first time, she let a forbidden thought enter her mind. "I need to leave." That night, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her stomach twisted in hunger. Her body ached from the endless labor, and her heart felt heavy with loneliness. Victoria's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "She's just a burden." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. Crying didn't change anything. It never had. But those words returned to her. Too. Kids are supposed to play. Emma had never questioned her life before. She had accepted the cruelty, the exhaustion, the hunger, because she thought she had no other choice. But what if she did? A small flicker of hope lit inside her. Fragile but determined, she had to leave. Her heart pounded as she sat up in bed, straining to listen for any sound. The house was silent. Victoria had gone to bed hours ago. Emma tiptoed to the door, her hands shaking as she carefully turned the knob. The old hinges creaked slightly, and she froze, holding her breath. No sound from Victoria's room. Slowly, carefully, she crept down the hallway and made her way to the front door. The night air seeped through the cracks, chilling her skin. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the lock. This is it. She turned it, inch by inch, trying to keep quiet. When the door finally clicked open, a gust of cold wind rushed against her. Emma hesitated for only a moment before stepping outside. The street was dark and empty. The only light came from the occasional street lamp flickering in the distance. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself and began walking. She had passed the Cedar Falls police station once before with her father. Back when things had been different, when she had still felt safe. She tried to remember the way, forcing her tired legs to keep moving. Her breath came out in small, shaky puffs as she hurried down the sidewalk, the cold biting at her exposed skin. Every sound made her heart race. She half expected to hear Victoria's angry voice behind her, dragging her back, but there was only silence. Minutes stretched into what felt like forever. The houses became fewer, the streets emptier. Emma's feet ached, but she pushed forward. Then, finally, In the distance, she saw it. A small, lit building, standing solid and safe against the night. The police station. A sob of relief almost escaped her lips. But she swallowed it down and kept walking, forcing her tired legs to move faster. She reached the door, her tiny hands shaking as she pushed it open. The warm air hit her instantly, contrasting the freezing night outside. A man in uniform looked up from behind a desk, his face immediately softening when he saw her. "Well, now," he said gently, "what are you doing here, sweetheart?" Emma's lips trembled, her vision blurred with tears. I need help," she whispered. Emma sat in the warm embrace of her father, Daniel, as they left the courthouse, the weight of the past finally lifting from her small shoulders. Victoria had been found guilty of child exploitation and was sentenced to prison. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Emma was finally free. For the first time in what felt like forever. She no longer had to wake up in fear. No longer had to clean until her hands ached or endure cruel words that made her feel worthless. Her father, full of regret, vowed never to leave her side again. He found a new home, far from the painful memories of Cedar Falls, and enrolled her in Brookside Elementary School. He made sure she had warm meals, cozy blankets, and, most importantly, love. Emma slowly learned what it meant to be a child again. She made friends, including Noah, who was overjoyed to see her happy and safe. She even joined a ballet class, something she had only dreamed of before. Months later, as she stood on stage in a flowing dress, her heart pounded, not from fear, but excitement. The music began, and she danced, every movement a symbol of her journey, her resilience, her newfound freedom. In the audience, Daniel clapped with pride, tears in his eyes. Mrs. Patterson and Linda Parker smiled warmly, knowing Emma had finally found the life she deserved. As Emma bowed, she felt something she hadn't in years, happiness. She had been lost in the darkness, but she had found her way to the light. Her story was proof that no matter how hard life gets, hope and courage can lead to a new beginning. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming life stories. Thank you for watching.